Back when I was growing up, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, actually, in the southern part of the U.S. You could still see the skies, even from fairly large cities. And as a young boy, I would be playing outside in the summertime. One summer, when I was a young teenager, maybe 12, maybe 13, something like that, I saw what's to me one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen. I saw a meteor streak across the summer sky. It was huge. It was bright. It lit up the sky. It was the most beautiful yellow color you can imagine, and it's what's called a horizon grazer. In other words, it went all the way across the sky, from horizon to horizon, lasting much longer than many meteors do that are just a brief flash in the sky. To me, it was love at first sight. I fell in love with the sky. And from that point on, I can't explain it. It's like seeing a girl and falling in love. And it's like, I know I'm going to marry that girl. I fell in love with the sky, with the heavens, everything about it. Stars, planets, galaxies, optics, telescopes, binoculars, you name it. Anything that had to do with the sky, that had to do with the stars. From that point on, they were all fascinating to me. I was completely entranced by them. My academic background is not in astronomy, although when I went to school, I went to a very good liberal arts school, the University of Chicago. This was back in the 60s, where that was taken really seriously. So although I was not a science or physics or astronomy major, I took a lot of courses in those subjects. My degrees are all in philosophy and the history of ideas. Of course, a lot of the philosophy that I studied was the philosophy of science and related subjects. But my academic background is not in astronomy at all. It's something that I picked up as a very serious hobbyist over the years, reading books, magazines, and of course these days all the information available on the internet. My star tours really began as my hobby here. I would go out and gaze at the sky and take my telescopes, stay out. I discovered, however, that I was making one big mistake, and that was this. My wife has no interest in astronomy, and so I was turning her into an astronomy widow. You know what that is? It's like if you have a hobby and your wife has no interest in it, and you go out and do it, she becomes that hobby widow, like a golf widow or a tennis widow. Not a good idea to do that to your wife. However, I discovered if you tell your wife that you're going to work, you can do anything you want. So I decided to turn my hobby into my new career. No one was doing star tours here at that time, and I thought, wow, no one's taking advantage of the beautiful skies here to show people the wonders of creation, the wonders of God's heavens. It's so beautiful. Why don't I do that? I also have a little bit of a background in theater from my time in New York. So I thought, let me give it a try. I'll start offering star tours to people. And I did. Little by little, they built up, got more and more word of mouth, the internet, Facebook, things like that. So eventually they got structured in the following way. I go out into the desert, into the dark, not hard to get to here because we're in the middle of nowhere. And I set up what I call my portable observatory, which is my telescopes, first of all, chairs, blankets for everybody to help keep them warm. And as I like to tell people, we don't do any walking or hiking, even though it's called a star tour, because the stars are too far away to get to. We just sit and let our eyes do the walking. So we're out for about 2 hours. The first half of the tour, we do naked eye observing of the sky, really my favorite way to enjoy the heavens, especially here, where we see so many stars. We learn to identify constellations, which is so hard for people to do because they don't really look the way their namesake suggests. You need a guide to point them out to you. Identify bright stars, their names. I like to teach people sky lore and star lore, the history of the sky and how the constellations came to be the way they are, why the stars are called what they are, a lot of the science behind it as well, and help people understand a little bit about how the sky works, because it's a big mystery to people. People don't even understand why don't I see the moon every night in the sky? Okay, basic question. I'd like to be able to answer those and help people understand their place in the universe, their place in the cosmos. So that's the first half of the tour. Then the second half of the tour, we go to the telescopes to see the best sights of the night, whatever that may be. Bright stars, double stars, planets, of course, galaxies, nebulae, glowing clouds of gas. That varies from season to season because we see different stars and different constellations in the sky throughout the year. As the Earth orbits the sun, we're continuously looking out into a different part of space. So we see different objects in the sky throughout the year. Yeah, well, everybody's favorites are the planets because they look very dramatic, even in a small telescope. So probably everybody's favorite is the planet Saturn and its rings. And Saturn is such an uncanny-looking object that it's one of the few objects that looks exactly the way you expect it to, which is rare because most of the photographs you see are taken with these huge observatory instruments with exposures over many hours of time. You wouldn't even see what you're looking at in that photograph if you look through the instrument. Saturn, it looks exactly like you think it's going to. Beautiful rings. We see its moons a lot of the time. The bands on the planet, gorgeous. Next, Jupiter, the biggest of the planets. It's immense. We see the bands on it. We see the cloud storms. We see the great red spot and its beautiful 4 Galilean moons. Those are probably the 4 favorite planets. So I guess I should add Mars, even though Mars tends to be rather small. It's not a very big planet. It's half the size of Earth. It's still one of the most storied planets in all of science fiction writing, right? So Mars is a big favorite as well. So those are the favorite planets that we see. Star clusters that we see, the Pleiades star cluster, the double cluster in Perseus. When you look at star clusters, you see an eyepiece that is full of stars. It's what I call the money shot. It's like that's what everybody wants to see, right? You want to look through a telescope, you want to see 1 star, you want to see 2 stars, you want to see, wow, I want to see hundreds of stars. So star clusters are another very favorite. And then finally, galaxies, especially close galaxies like the Andromeda Galaxy, an island universe, 2.5 million light years away. And you have to remind people you're looking at an object the way it was 2.5 million years ago. The light entering your eye took 2.5 million years to reach you. It's like, what a privilege to be here and experience that as you look through the telescope. So a lot of the wonder is not just what you see, because we have small telescopes compared to big observatory instruments, understanding what that means, what it is. So that's those are my top objects and usually people's favorites at the telescope. We get entire airplane shows in the sky here. We don't just see 1 or 2 planes. We are very close in the desert to a number of Israeli Air Force bases, especially Mitzpe Ramon, Camp Ramon, which is a major IAF base, only about 30 miles from here. And on many nights, we see dozens of fighter jets in the sky here. You never know what they're doing. Are they training? Are they flying exercises? Are they going on missions? But they are in the sky and they are doing amazing stuff. It really adds to the tour when they are up there. Sometimes they just fly over slowly, but a lot of times when, especially if they're flying exercises, you'll see them do dives and turns and you feel your stomach almost come out from the G-forces that those pilots must have undergone. You'll see them flying probably close to the speed of sound, not quite, because we don't get sonic booms. We sometimes get sonic booms, but they are flying incredibly fast. You see them, what I call, put the pedal to the metal. The afterburners come on, and the flames shoot out of the back of these planes, and you cannot believe how fast they are going. Then all of a sudden, that plane will change direction like that. And it's like, wow, how do you do that? So I like to joke that they're ruining the constellations when they're up there, because they don't look like the constellations anymore. We have little dots in the sky that don't belong there. There are all these jets that are flying around. But it's nice to be able to talk about them. Sometimes they'll drop flares, which I believe are practice for dropping evasive measures, right? You have heat-seeking missiles that are trying to lock on the exhaust of the airplane. So they drop flares that divert the missiles. The missiles go to the flares. So a lot of times, not only will we see these jets flying in the sky, but we'll see them dropping flares, not just one, but a whole series of flares, one after the other, they light up the entire sky. They're incredibly bright, and it's like a fireworks show. It's like Yom HaAtzmaut, or July 4th around here when that happens. We definitely see objects that are not celestial bodies or airplanes. Most of them, I believe, are satellites. They are just dots of light in the sky. We never see an object per se. There are thousands of satellites in the sky, and if you're out at the right time of night, you see them moving across the sky. There are apps that are available if you are a dedicated satellite watcher, and there are. You can use those to try and identify them. I am not a dedicated satellite watcher, so I can't identify them. They are points of light in the sky moving across it. I've learned to identify them and call them satellites. I did one time see a very strange group of objects in the sky that I could only identify as some weird, unidentified type of aircraft. It was a very strange plane. It was not flying very high. You could definitely see the shape of its body. It had no shape like I had ever seen before. And it was accompanied by jets that were flying alongside of it. So I could only assume it was some military type of object because of that, but it was a very, very strange one, and it stuck in my mind because of that. They were all flying together in formation, making a big U-turn in the sky around Mitzpe Ramon, not particularly high, not particularly low, not particularly fast. But I do remember looking up at it and going, what the hell is that? And, if it had been by itself, I might have said, that's a UFO, okay? But since it was accompanied by military jets, I have to assume if it was a UFO, it was a Israeli UFO, perhaps a test plane, perhaps a scientific plane, perhaps a plane that had been outfitted with all kinds of special listening gear or scientific gear. You never know. But definitely not your run-of-the-mill, ordinary airplane that you could look at and go, oh, okay, that's like an airplane of some kind. It was strange. It had wings, but not any kind of wings that you would ordinarily identify with either a commercial or a military plane. There were all kinds of pods of strange types that were on it. I wished I had a camera with a long lens on me, and I thought I might even end up reading about it somewhere. It looked so strange, but I didn't. It was there for a brief while. It was accompanied by these other planes and vanished. Not what you conventionally call a UFO. I saw an object that I could not identify as a recognizable conventional aircraft of any kind that I had seen before. So it was an unidentified flying object to that extent. But it was not what I thought, oh my goodness, I'm seeing a alien UFO, for example. And maybe that sense was enhanced by the fact that it was accompanied by other aircraft as well. So it gave it more of a kind of earthly sense of maybe an experimental plane of some kind that was being shepherded along in the sky. So not your conventional UFO, but not any type of flying object that I was familiar with. They've pointed out to me meteors, of course, in the sky, or that they saw a meteor. They go so quickly that once you see them, it's too late to show them to someone else. And they pointed out jets to me. They pointed out points of light moving in the sky, which I would conventionally identify as a satellite. But no, none of them have ever seen and mentioned to me that they are observing something that is completely strange and unidentifiable to them. No, not even jokingly. Perhaps it's just because we dive straight in to the astronomy of the sky. Although there are a lot of opportunities for people to do that, of course, I guess, because we do see all of these satellites, we do see all of these military jets in the sky, so it's not like we're only talking about the stars. But no, actually, no one, as I can recall, has ever asked me about UFOs or my experience with UFOs. So, our own little Roswell, I wish, actually. I kind of joke. I do have a joke about that, actually, which is when we're observing Mars through our telescopes, and I talk about Mars, and there are 2 rovers on Mars now, Curiosity and Opportunity, that are still operating, wandering around, sending back imagery. And a lot of times I show people photographs from the rovers. And I say, look at this photograph of Mars that was taken by Opportunity. Doesn't it look just like Mitzpe Ramon? And they go, yeah, wow, it does. And I say, well, you know what? If you see a little rover wandering around here, don't bother it. It thinks it's on Mars. It kind of plays into this, this I will say crackpot idea that we didn't land on the moon, that we didn't go to Mars, that, it all happened here. Well, it could have. Okay, it looks like Mars. So I do have that little joke. That's as far, for now, as we've gone to having our own event of UFO-type objects in Mitzpe Ramon. However, one of the Israeli universities is opening in Mitzpe Ramon a bio lab to mimic conditions on Mars. And they are establishing a Mars habitat, to train Earthlings to survive on Mars. It's going to be here in Mitzpe Ramon. Why? It looks just like Mars. And they're going to lock them up in this habitat, and they're going to pretend they're on Mars. So now I get another opportunity to tell people, go out there, you can look at that, and it's just like being on Mars, but you're not. So that's as close as we come here in Mitzpe Ramon, as far as I know, to having Roswell-type UFO-type events, sort of my own personal jokes and this Mars habitat that's going to be established here. Are we alone in the universe? one of the most profound and interesting scientific questions today. There are a lot of research projects, SETI, as they're called, SETI is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, where we are trying to pick up signals from other worlds that are sent our way by extraterrestrial intelligences. And it's one of the most profound questions that you can ask. There's a very famous equation called the Drake equation that was formulated in 1959 by a scientist to set up the parameters that we need to consider in order to judge whether we might be alone. And most of these parameters at the time, and even today, we have no firm answer to. We just don't know. They are completely unknown. And so, for the most part, you're asking a kind of philosophical question, which is, do you believe it's likely that there are other worlds in habitable zones around stars? Well, now we know some of the answer to that question. The answer is yes, there are. We've actually discovered those in the last 10 years, thanks to the satellite called Kepler. And there are well over 1,000 exoplanets, that's planets outside of our solar system, that have been discovered. And there are those planets, many of them are in what's called the habitable zone around their star, which is where life could exist. We don't know that it does. It's just possible for life as we know it. So some of the parameters of the Drake equation are getting filled in. Most of the parameters are unknown. So anyone who answers that question is going to give you a philosophical answer. Here's how I feel about the likelihood of life evolving in general. So my answer today is that the universe is a big place. You asked me about the whole universe. There are 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. That's a big number. It seems like among 2 trillion galaxies and, 10 to the 50th stars and 10 to the 30th planets, it's a lot of opportunities for life to exist. But galaxies are so far away, we can only dream about even getting to the nearest star, that it might be a moot point to talk about extraterrestrial intelligence in galaxies so far away. For the most part, we kind of confine ourselves to the Milky Way, our own galaxy, which is a pretty big place. There are somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion stars in the Milky Way. Perhaps there are over 50 million planets. That's the estimate now. That could support life. That seems like a pretty good chance that there could be life. However, I don't think it's there. Let me tell you why. Okay? It's not because I believe that evolution doesn't occur. It's not because that I don't believe that it's possible for things like that to get started. It's just this. If you look into space, the universe, it is an incredibly hostile place. We live on, it's been called Spaceship Earth, and it is a spaceship. And most people have no idea how precarious our existence is here. If it weren't for the Earth's atmosphere, if it weren't for the Earth's ozone layer, never mind we breathe the atmosphere, forget about that. We'd get fried by the sun. If it weren't for the magnetosphere, we would be fried by the sun. Stars are incredibly hostile forces to life. And because of that, it seems that our existence here is due to almost a miracle. Everything balanced out in just the right way. Let's talk about the evolution of life here. As you probably know, and most people know, there was an extinction event that occurred about 65 million years ago when a huge asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula. It wiped out 90% of the life here on Earth, and the dinosaurs famously became extinct. Well, that made way for us, okay? what if that event hadn't happened? Well, there'd probably not be an us. Well, that was a complete accidental event. Now, not only was it accidental, recently I've read it gets even better, because if that asteroid happened to hit a part of the Earth that had a huge amount of volatile material that created a nuclear winter, if it hadn't hit that very place, that extinction event wouldn't have occurred. We wouldn't be here. The dinosaurs would be here instead. So there's so many of these accidental circumstances that have to happen in just the right way, that, and what's the probability of them happening? That it seems that we are kind of teetered on a knife edge here between the Earth protecting us from the hostile forces of the universe that want to wipe us out, to random events that happen to occur in a certain way, that let evolution occur in a certain way, that allowed us to emerge and be here. Those events, for all of those events to happen over and over and over and over again, yeah, you probably need 10 to the 50 stars for that to happen. We're on the one where it happened. I have a hard time believing it happened anywhere else, at least in our galaxy. That's what I'm confining ourselves to. Once you leave the galaxy, now you're getting into huge, huge numbers and real speculation. I was addressing myself to intelligent life. That's true. That's what SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, by its name, obviously, refers to, because we're looking for radio signals that can only be sent by intelligent life. Microbes don't do that. So the question is, on a more primitive level, is it possible that there is a world that is full of microbes, viruses, bacteria, but where intelligent life has not evolved yet? Of course it's possible, but these hostile forces that I've been talking about, that spaceship Earth protects us from, they're hostile not just to intelligent life, they're hostile to biological life, all life. They wipe it out before it even gets started. So I must say, although it might put me in the minority, I'm very skeptical that there is primitive life on these other worlds, these other planets. As I said, it all depends on your philosophical leaning, and as I also said, my philosophical leaning changes from time to time. And sometimes I lean more one way in terms of feeling that maybe we could have circumstances that would support life. Sometimes I lean the other way. And these days I'm leaning towards the universe is a very hostile place, and life is a very fragile phenomenon. Even if it got a foothold, it probably isn't a place where life is not going to be able to flourish, and it will become extinguished by the hostile forces of the cosmos. It's true that there are a lot of advanced technologies that very ancient peoples have. If you take, for example, the pyramids today, if you talk to archaeologists who really understand the pyramids, their structure, they are complete mysteries. We have no answer to the question of how those structures were built and how they could have had the knowledge that they did to build them. They're mysteries to us. So there are technologies that we could use today to build something like that. They were not available to those people. How did they do it? We don't know. It's a common metaphor among many cultures of a god or God who comes down from heaven. And in the Jewish tradition, we talk about Moses going up to Mount Sinai. God comes down. It seems to be the way that humans describe meeting the numinous, meeting the spiritual. They go up to it, it comes down to them. Does that mean that those were alien beings that came from outer space? Not necessarily, but there are artifacts from outer space that may have inspired stories like this among ancient peoples, because there are meteors that fall from the sky and hit the earth. They're called meteorites when they do. And many of these meteorites are made of iron. All right, I actually happen to have a bag of rocks from outer space right here, my little collection of rocks from outer space. You can see that they actually want to go back to outer space. That's why I keep them in this bag over here. These are genuine meteorites that fell to Earth after traveling billions of years, and they are some of the oldest objects in our solar system. Meteorites are unchanged over the course of billions of years. There's no erosion in outer space. So these rocks are over 4 billion years old. So I'm going to show you a rock that is only slightly older than your mother-in-law, if you happen to have one. And this is one of my most prized possessions. It's an iron meteorite. This is 90% iron. It is incredibly heavy. I have a magnet here that I like to throw on it just to show you that it is made of iron. It comes from northwestern Argentina, an area that was called Campo del Cielo by the conquistadors who came there from Spain. Of course, the ancient Aboriginal peoples who were there knew about this before the conquistadors did. And when the conquistadors arrived, they found that those ancient native peoples were already using the metal from outer space to make implements, knives, arrowheads, spear points. Now, those people don't know how to make iron. So they used found material from outer space that fell from the sky in order to fashion implements with. It turns out that as we study ancient implements, ancient jewelry, that it was very common for ancient peoples to make jewelry and fashion implements from iron that fell from the sky, meteorites. Before the Iron Age, humans actually learned to use iron, to fashion iron instruments before the Iron Age by using found rocks from outer space. It's incredible. You could say their technology originated from the skies. Now, this is a small chunk of that meteorite. This is one of the largest strewn fields, as it's called, in the world. There are over 100 tons of this material that fell to Earth, that survived their fiery fall to Earth. So when that hit the Earth, that was about 5,000 years ago that this meteorite hit the Earth, you can bet that that was noticed by these peoples, all right? And then this became part of their culture, became incorporated into it. It would seem logical for them to describe that as what? Some great visitation from outer space, perhaps, some god that had made his presence known and that had bequeathed them these pieces of iron, which then became incorporated into their culture. A few years ago, there was a necklace that was discovered in an Egyptian tomb, and it had iron beads, which when they were analyzed, it turns out the iron from those beads did not come from Earth. It came from meteoritic material from outer space, and that necklace was fashioned before the Iron Age, before people knew how to make their own iron. So the Egyptians, they too were gifted by what? A gift from the gods, a gift from aliens who dropped material that became part and parcel of their culture, their civilization. So there are, you could call this a UFO in a lot of ways. What would that have been called by ancient peoples? An object so large that there's 100 tons of it that were left after it exploded and blew up on Earth. And then it became part of their technology and part of their civilization. So we do have instances of, if you were an ancient person, you might call this a god that came down and visited you. So there are instances of that, many instances of this having happened over the ages. Now, does this explain the advanced technologies and knowledge of some of those peoples? No, it doesn't. That remains a mystery. But that doesn't mean that they were taught it by alien beings. There are things in heaven and earth, Horatio, that are beyond our knowledge. It doesn't mean that their origin is from some mysterious alien source. Orion's one of the most prominent constellations in the sky. It figures largely in the sky lore of many cultures and many civilizations. It's a very obvious and easy to identify constellation. That's the only reason I can think that it figures largely in the orientation and placement of ancient monuments. Just as an aside, you should double check that they actually that there are definite orientations that these huge monuments have, and they're usually attributed to some alignment with celestial bodies. I did read recently that most of the alignments that have been claimed for them are incorrect, and that they are aligned not so much to this or that constellation, but for the pyramids, for example, they're aligned perfectly north, but so close to north that you would have a hard time actually aligning them today if you use modern surveyors' techniques. They are like exactly aligned. Now, I'm not sure on what, but yeah, they are aligned in some fashion, in ways that we can't understand or explain how it was possible for them to make such an exact alignment of such monumental bodies, such monumental objects. How did they all do this together? Or why did they pick these? Well, north is a pretty prominent position, if that's what they're aligned to. The constellation Orion, one of the most prominent constellations in the sky, and as I said, figures largely in many ancient cultures' sky lore and sky story because it is such a prominent, easy to identify figure. So perhaps more because of that than for any other reason. Ancient peoples, it's true, did not have modern instruments that they could use to measure the sky, or telescopes with which to observe the sky. But they were very keen observers of the sky, and the skies were very important to ancient peoples. For one thing, in many ancient civilizations, not necessarily the Jews, who you asked me about, the stars are deities, they're gods. That's where the power of astrology came from, the influence of the heavenly bodies on the affairs of people on Earth. So it's not like these ancient peoples were just casual observers of the sky. They were very serious observers of the sky, and they recorded what they saw. We have records that have come down to us of astronomical calculations, astronomical positions of objects in tablets, in clay tablets that date all the way back to the Sumerians and the Babylonians, of astronomical bodies, planets, stars, their positions, their changes. And so they did observe this. I'm not sure that I know enough to agree that they were not sophisticated enough to be able to do this themselves. I've never heard that they weren't, actually. You do have to make very careful observations to do this. As far as I know, the observations they made were within the tolerances of the available equipment that they had to measure angular positions and to measure times in the sky. So I can't really, I don't really have a comment about claims that they couldn't do this. I don't know that that's true or not. So I'm not personally familiar with that, but as you probably know, that in addition to the written Torah, Torah Shebiksav, there's also Torah Shebal Peh. There's the oral law, which was given to Moshe by God at Har Sinai. And the few things that I have read about specific, exact measurements like that are attributed to that source. That basically, that was part of what God communicated to Moses at Har Sinai. And specifically, why about the moon? Because the moon plays such an important role in the setting of the Jewish calendar. The first command to the Jewish people by God is to sanctify the new moon. And so to do that, you have to know when the new moon is. When is the new moon? How do you calculate it? It's part of what was communicated, according to Jewish tradition, to God from to Moshe at Har Sinai. As I said, I am not personally familiar with the numbers that you're talking about or those exact circumstances. So what I'm giving you is kind of, I think, what is just a general answer to your questions. How would something specific like that, let's say it is beyond anybody's ability to communicate or to calculate back then, how did the Jews get it? That was part of what God told Moshe at Har Sinai about setting the new moon, how to calculate the new moon. In the Torah, the first command to Moses is to we're told, look at the sky. This is the new moon. HaChodesh hazeh yeh lahem Roshei Chodeshim. This month is for you the beginning of the month. God told Moses how to calculate those months at Har Sinai. That's where that information would have come from. That old age is a terrible thing. It's the statement of a single individual without any supporting evidence whatsoever. and no one has come forward to provide any supporting evidence. Just because you walked on the moon doesn't mean that you don't get senile when you get old. It doesn't mean that you might even believe in conspiracy theories. Maybe you believe there was another shooter on the grassy knoll in Dallas, Texas that day. Being an astronaut doesn't make you immune from all of the frailties that human beings have. It also doesn't mean that it might not be true. It actually might be true. I don't know. But it's just one guy saying it. The fact that he was an astronaut actually doesn't give me any more confidence in having him say it than anybody else, unless he can come forward with some other evidence other than his just saying so. Otherwise, it's just another guy. I looked at the video of him saying that. It's only a partial video. It's not clear if he goes on beyond that. If he did, I haven't seen that video. But it sounds like something that a scientist or a philosopher or any thoughtful person might say about the search for truth. It's hard to uncover. It's disguised. J.B.S. Haldane, famous scientist who I quote on my website, says, the universe is not only stranger than you think, it is stranger than you can think. So, to me, he's simply making a philosophical statement in that vein. If he's alluding to anything beyond that there are cover-ups of some deep truth about aliens and UFOs, that's in the mind of the hearer. He certainly isn't saying that, and can be interpreted as just a statement about the importance of pursuing the truth and the difficulties of uncovering it. A lot of people think that talk about UFOs and the fascination with UFOs is kind of a crackpot notion, kind of on a par with conspiracy theories and the like. But really, if you think about it, it's maybe just the common man's way of doing SETI, what scientists do, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. We want to reach out and find others to communicate with. That's sort of been the history of human civilization. And we sort of exhausted our search on planet Earth. We found everybody to talk to on planet Earth. I guess occasionally we find lost tribes in Africa and the Amazon. Those are the exception. And now people want to look beyond that. Scientists do that in a way that is what we call scientific. They do SETI research, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. They set up radio telescopes and they look for signals from outer space. Most people can't do that. It's not within their ken. Most people don't even understand that. They have the same desire, though, to reach out and hope that there are other people out there that are trying to communicate with us, that we're trying to communicate with them. How does that desire manifest itself? Maybe in the belief in UFOs. I don't understand SETI. I'm not a scientist. I'm a common person. But I want to reach out. I want to reach out into the depths of the cosmos. I want to find, I want to see other beings, other life forms. I can't do it in a scientific way. I'll do it in my common layman's way. I'll look for, or I'll believe in UFOs. Is the belief in UFOs any crazier than the belief that there's signals coming from outer space to us that are sent by intelligent beings? Maybe not. It's the same thing. One of them's looking for radio waves, the other's just looking for sightings of ships. If they're radio waves, maybe they're ships. Why not?